In this video, we're going to look at different methods for how to find primary and secondary research articles and to answer and develop research questions that you can use what's called basically literature search. So I'm going to tell, instead of just going through these methods one by one, I'm going to tell a little scientific story. And so this started when I was a postdoc at Cornell University working for this guy, Kyle Lancaster. So when you want to become a professor, you have to apply to be a professor, and part of the application for this position is to write what's called a research proposal, or a job proposal. And so what this does is this gives an idea of what you will study, what your research lab will do when you become an assistant professor and when you run the lab. And so this sort of is the story of how I used as inspiration research that I had done as a grad student and as a postdoc, and turned it into a program that was completely different from anything I had been worked on before. And this became my job proposal. So just a little background up to that point, which when I started writing my job proposal was the summer of 2016. And so I had worked mainly with metalloenzymes. So these are active sites of metalloenzymes. And the important part here is that they had something in common. So both of these enzymes, these are the reactants and the products of both these enzymes. Both of these enzymes made nitrous oxide. And so they did this by taking molecules that did not have NN bonds and forming an NN bond. So in this case, nitric oxide is converted to nitrous oxide. And in this case on the right, hydroxylamine is converted to nitrous oxide. And so something I had studied then up to that point a lot was NN bond formation to form nitrous oxide. So when I started my research proposal, I was looking at a number of reviews, and this was one that I was looking at. So this is the title of a review article, How to Make a Living from Anaerobic Ammonia Oxidation by Boren Kartal and coworkers. And so what a review article is a type of secondary literature that compiles all the literature in a particular subfield and both summarizes it and organizes it, and also often critically evaluates all of the research articles for this subfield. And so this particular one was on anaerobic ammonia oxidation. And so this interested me a lot because this had this really interesting NN bond formation that was different from anything I had studied to that point, where nitric oxide and ammonium are taken by this enzyme called hydrazine synthase, and hydrazine is made. And so this is really fascinating for a lot of different reasons from a biological perspective. Mostly, one thing in particular is that hydrazine, for instance, is used in rocket fuel. So what's this doing inside of a bacteria? And how is this made? And there are a number of questions that are associated with this. And of course, I would have loved to have somehow gotten involved in this type of research from a metalloenzymology perspective, but I noticed there are a lot of reasons that I shouldn't. And so I thought, well, is there some other way I can study these types of NN bond formations without actually looking at this particular system? And so that led to a research question that I could perform a literature search on. And so my question was, are there other biological molecules with hydrazine-like bonds, so NN bonds, that look sort of like hydrazine? And so that led me to a Google search where I just typed in natural product hydrazine. And what was interesting is that a article came immediately up that had all of my keywords in there in the title. So natural hydrazine containing compounds, biosynthesis, isolation, biological activities, and synthesis. So that's very nice. The title included most of my keywords, or had sounded like something that I'd be interested in. And so I pulled this up, and this is the article that I looked at. So by Legoff and Ouazani. And within this, it discussed natural products that were made by different types of organisms that had NN bonds in them, such as this one. There's an NN bond here. These are nitrosamines. There are these hydrazine compounds like this. And this just goes on and on about different NN bond natural products formed by different types of organisms. And so at the beginning of the article, there's a discussion about with proposals about how these are made, because at the time none of these compounds really, there wasn't really much information, if any at all, on how the NN bonds were formed. And so there's a discussion of one proposal where much like N2O that forms an NN bond, that maybe the NN bonds within some of these natural products are formed through metal nitrosyl intermediates on metalloenzymes. And so having worked a lot on nitrous oxide formation, I had done a lot of studying on metal nitrosyls, and particularly iron nitrosyls. So I thought, well, this is really interesting. And what I knew from my studies that often NN bonds can be made from nitric oxide, which was another research interest of mine to that point. So I thought, well, that'd be really cool if maybe natural products, there are natural products out there that require nitric oxide for their biosynthesis. And so that led me to another research question where I asked, all right, are there natural products that involve nitric oxide? And so these are the keywords I used. Type those into Google. And what I get is a lot of hits that are involved with weightlifting supplements or, for instance, other sort of natural health remedies and whatnot. And that's because of the particular keywords that I use. So natural products is a keyword that will often be found on these types of websites that are selling herbal remedies, and nitric oxide is a keyword that's often found in these weightlifting supplements. So I had to find a way. I had to revise the search so that I get something that's more academic in what I'm looking for. So I decided to add the word biosynthesis in order to narrow down the keywords, in order to narrow down and refine my search results. So a lot of these references at the top were not available. When I was doing the search, which was at 2016. But one paper that I did use is, where did Google hide it? Right. Natural product nitric oxide biosynthesis. Yes, and so one paper that it did turn up was this one, investigating the biosynthetic origin of the nitro group in pyrrolomycins. And so it wasn't clear to me from the title what this had to do with my key search, with my keyword search in Google. But I noticed in the abstract, which is at the top of the paper here, it said biosynthesis of nitrate pyrrolomycins was unaffected by the presence of nitric oxide synthase inhibitors. It wasn't very clear, however, from the abstract why this was tested. It just gave the result. And so I had to look deeper into the paper to figure out why there's a link between nitric oxide synthase and these compounds called pyrrolomycins. And so I found within the introduction this highlighted passage, which discusses nitric oxide synthase in bacteria that was used to form a compound called Thaxtomin A. And so this seemed like something that was this seemed much more directed at what my current research question was. And remember, that was, is nitric oxide involved in natural product biosynthesis? So I looked at this reference, which is reference number 14. And so remember, from our previous videos, we know that we can just copy and paste the citation, plug it into Google, and we're likely to find what we're looking for here. So this is the paper that we're looking for by Kurz et al. And so this top hit is PubMed, so we can go to Nature to get the original paper. And here it is, nitration of a peptide phytotoxin by bacterial nitric oxide synthase. And so what this paper discusses is that nitric oxide is important for forming this molecule Thaxtomin A, and this shows the data that indicate that that is absolutely the case. And this led me down a much longer literature search, or which you might even call a rabbit hole, that I still haven't quite completely climbed out of. Now, notice that this paper that I'd found was from 2004. And remember, I was doing this literature search in 2016. So there's potentially 12 years of research that I was missing that had stemmed off from this particular paper. So in order to figure out what had been pursued since this paper was published, we can use Google Scholar. And so Google Scholar is a tool that can be added to your toolbar in your browser of choice. Oops. If you don't highlight something, it will see the name of the paper on the website, and it'll pull it up into this widget. Okay, so this has the citation, it has the name, it also has part of the abstract in for this paper. And what's really useful here is this link down here that says cited by 224. So what that means is there are 224 articles that came after this paper that have cited this paper. And so what that means is there are 224 articles from when this was published in 2004 to today that I can look at. So you click on that, and what you get is you get all the research that's been done since then that cites that paper, so it's somehow related to that paper. So to narrow your search, what I want to do is look up only articles that had come from the lab that had published this research. And so what you're looking for here is you'll find what's called the corresponding author. And the corresponding author is the often the principal investigator or the PI of the lab that was responsible for generating this research. And so the person that did this, the lab that this is from Dr. Rosemary Lauria. And so what I wanted to do was just look for papers that had come from there. And what we can do is we can click this search within citing articles, type in Lauria, so that it finds only articles that have Dr. Lauria's name in them, or preferably as an author. And so what you see is that you get a new list that's been whittled down that only has Dr. Lauria as an author, as an author on the paper. And so this led me to a much longer literature search that I read through and eventually developed the program that is now our research program at UCF, which we call Noxnation, where we look at the installation of nitro groups and NN bonds that we think require nitric oxide or other compounds such as nitrite and nitrate for their installation. And so that's the story of that, the sort of truncated story, but a story of how to do research, a literature search, or really how I think of it is how do you come up with questions and then answer them in an academic way. So let's summarize the methods used in this literature search. So first, develop a research question to answer. The more specific you make the research question, the easier it'll be able to find your answer. Okay, and then we can use our best friend Google. We can use a keyword search, or you can use whatever your favorite browser is, or your favorite search engine is. It doesn't matter, and that can help us locate papers that will help us to answer our questions. Sometimes it's not enough to use the keywords that you used. And sometimes, for instance, in this example, the keywords were too common to, for instance, websites that sell natural product remedies or natural remedies or weight gain supplements. So we had to revise that in that case. But you also may need to revise your keywords because perhaps you don't know the technical language of a particular subfield. And so ways you can get used to that is either by finding review papers that are broadly discuss the question you're trying to answer and get more refined technical words that you can then revise your search with. Another way is to read the introductions of papers, and that can also give you a lot of information. The introduction is almost like a mini review. Okay. Follow references in the papers to find older papers that the paper you're looking at cites, and that can give you a more focused look at a topic you're interested in. Or you can move the opposite direction, where you can use Google Scholar to see cited papers. So that is papers that came after the paper you're looking at to the present time.